This is Ed Evenson, Operations Manager at Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. You're watching the NAB Show, live, produced by Broadcast Beat.
Live from Las Vegas, this is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat. Here's your host, Brian Seth Hurst.
Welcome back to NAB Show Live. We are live just adjacent to the exhibit hall, to Central Hall. We are broadcasting from Studio One at NAB Show Live. I'm Brian Seth Hurst, and I'm your host for this hour, where we're going to be discussing the nuts and bolts of VR production. But before I get to that, I'm sure my panelists will agree that not a day goes by when there's not a significant announcement in VR. It's the fastest moving industry I've ever been a part of. So today, this is just today, Nokia, the Ozo camera, they announced the ability to stream live. YouTube announced live streaming 360, which will start tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Samsung Gear, and by the way, in order to do that, they've upped their the resolution to 1440 and 60 frames per second. Samsung Gear launched an AR application called Spectacle, which actually uses the rear view of your camera to layer in AR. HBO and Discovery have taken an equity stake in 3D rendering company Otoy, which renders complicated environments in the cloud. And GoPro, and they're going to announce some new entertainment experience soon. And GoPro announced a new VR video platform and a six-camera rig called the Omni for $5,000. Before that, you had to spend about $15,000 for 16 cameras. This is 6 GoPro Hero Blacks with hardware and software. So that was just today. I now turn to welcome my guests. We're going to have a rousing discussion about VR production, which is like the wild, wild west. To my right, I'm going right down the line. I have Michael Kintner from 360 Heroes. Welcome, Michael.
Well, thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to have you. And I have Nicolas, so I say Nicolas and pronounce it correctly.
Nicolas is perfect, yeah.
Nicolas Berti from Video Stitch, which is like, there are two main stitching programs that people use. One is owned by GoPro, which is called Color, and the other is you guys.
Yes.
But you surprised the industry just last week and announced a 4K live streaming camera, which we're going to talk about.
Yes, exactly. Thank you
Next,
for having me.
yes, thank you. Next is Thomas Wallner from Deep Ink, and you just launched Liquid Cinema, which is a post-production software, which is brilliant, and I'm happy that you're giving me access to it.
Okay, you're welcome.
Very much appreciated, but you've gotten very good reviews for that. We have creator Andrew McDonald from Cream in Canada. Welcome to Las Vegas, eh?
Thank you.
Okay. Thomas is also Canadian, so we have a good Canadian contingent. So, gentlemen, I'm actually going to start with Michael Kintner. So I'm letting the booth know because I'm calling for Michael's images. So it's called 360 Heroes, but to a certain extent, when it comes to the entire workflow, and I'm sure you'll all agree, the workflow is an issue. There's not a lot of standard workflow. Jaunt has one, you guys have one. But the thing about 360 Heroes is for anyone wanting to get started in VR and get familiar with programming and how to work your way through it, it's 360 Heroes, correct?
Exactly. It's part of the reasons that we have so many different types of rigs in reference to what we're doing out there is we know that there's not one solution to doing shooting 360 content. So that's why when we first started all this, we had 3D printed products, and we just introduced at the show here at NAB the new injection molded version with aluminum cores that you can literally put cameras together from 6 to 7 up to 10 and get resolutions as high as 24,000 pixels, which is pretty cool.
And that is really beautiful.
Yes, thank you.
It is really beautiful. And also, if you can have the hosting image, send up a couple of images for 360 Heroes, please. You just started hosting content as well, because I actually bought a hosting program.
Oh, yeah, that's great.
I actually bought the package.
Yep.
So there it is. There's Life in 360 Video, and if we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, what the hosting package allows the content provider to do is, once you get done shooting it, you can run it through a software package we call CamMan, and it'll help optimize it. And when you go to upload your content into our hosting center, what it'll do is it'll take that content and set it up in 4K mode, 2K mode, or 1K streaming, so that when you go to grab it with your iPhone or Android or from the PC, it'll automatically determine the fastest speed.
Exactly. That's fabulous.
Yep.
So one of the things that we're dealing with, that everybody's dealing with, is this organization of workflow. And it starts, I mean, you guys, when we're shooting, first of all, let me make this distinction, and I'm going to pick one of you to explain it. We have 360 video, Then we have 2D stereoscopic virtual reality immersive. And then we have 3D stereoscopic, which is either shot stereoscopic or actually use computational photography, right? Have I got it right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you. What's the difference between the three?
What's the difference between the three?
Yes.
Complexity, absolutely for sure. When you start getting into stereoscopic, you have to shoot in stereo, so you need 2 cameras on everything you're looking at.
So that doubles every camera.
It doubles every camera, and it also limits you quite drastically because there are certain things you cannot do that you can do in 2D. Like, for example, get very close to the camera, which we're finding in producing content makes it more compelling. I mean, when you use a rig like that and you use it out of the box and use it in the way that you learn when you first learn how to shoot VR and make stitching easy and what have you, everything is a good 5 to 8 feet away from the camera, and inherently, because you're on wide lenses, everything looks far away. So when we got into VR, we decided we wanted to get close to things. So we had to hack it. We had to modify that to be able to bring things close.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for a second because this is a great way to get started. And the guys that are sitting here right now, first of all, we could not work without video stitch. You just couldn't. Because stitching is a nightmare. You couldn't work without CamMan, actually, because when you have all these cameras, every one of them has an SD card. So if you're working with 6, 16, you got to label the camera. And by the way, GoPro just announced SyncBack, which is a product that actually allows for better syncing of the cameras, yes?
Yes.
So instead of me having to clap to sync the cameras or get my little motion, I can just start.
Yep.
But this is a great place to start. But the filmmakers, and we work with a lot of independent filmmakers. At Storytech, our model, Storytech Immersive, our model is to embed independent filmmakers with current production so that they can onboard capabilities pretty quickly. Those guys are hacking. So we're going to talk to Thomas and we're going to talk to Andrew in a minute about that, but I want to go to Nicholas right now. How does stitching work?
So stitching is a pretty complex system when you have different steps. So when you have a rig like this, you have overlap between images. So one video and the video next to it, there will be maybe 20% overlap between those. And with this overlap, we can compute, we can figure out that, okay, this camera is next to this one, and we do this for all the images.
With your iPhone or your Android phone, it stitches for you. But what we're really talking about is all of these cameras making a spherical shot. And before you can even edit it, you have to stitch it.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
And so if you think about the iPhone, like iPhone it's a still images. You know, like you turn and you take 30 seconds to make one images. When you want to make 360 videos, you cannot, make 30 seconds to make one image. You need to be like real time, like maybe 20 milliseconds. And this is really the challenge to do it.
So I would just think that the storage capability, so let me see if I'm right, because I'm trying to talk about the nuts and bolts here. So I've got 16 cards. Now I've used your software. Maybe I have a LaCie 1 terabyte in the field with me, right? And by the way, I'm going to have to keep my cameras cool, right? And I'm going to have a battery pack because these things won't last. There are all sorts of professional rigs like Ozo and John, different set of circumstances. But for the beginning filmmaker or even for the independent filmmaker, now I've got all this stuff. I can't edit on that 1 terabyte LaCie from the field, can I?
Well, you can. The advantage with CamMan, when you go to ingest the data, like the GoPros work really good, but sometimes you hit the remote and the remote doesn't work for all of them. But when you go to ingest the data, it'll actually tell you what take is bad and what take is good. So right on set, you can realize, oh, take 2, I'm gonna need to do that again. So you can do that with CamMan on set. Then you can quick stitch, like video stitch is really excellent, where you can just drop the stuff in and very quickly see the content on a low res type of format, so that you can do that on a laptop even, if you wanted to. So that kind of helps you out a little bit in the field.
That's great, because what I've noticed is, sometimes you have so much data that you got to get a RAID, and you got to work with 5 terabytes worth of disk and all of them spinning at the same time. I'm sure there are editors here. I mean, what's really interesting is some of the language is the same, but the language of VR filmmaking, I mean, you can't frame a shot, right?
Yep.
You got to hide your crew, right? You could shoot in 180 and still have the crew behind and then make that later. But these little things are the things that filmmakers have to work with in order to hack. And speaking of hacking, We're going to go to Andrew McDonald from Cream, and we have some images, and you guys are shooting. I'm pretty impressed with what you're shooting. So, by the way, for the audience, I am actually streaming this live on Facebook at the same time. So if I look like, why is that guy holding his mobile phone up like that? Well, you know, life is social now, so you really have to, you know, and I hope you all are getting a really nice view. Oh, we got about 110 people. So, you know, it's the middle of the day, it's lunch hours. We all got on the phone to talk about what Liquid Cinema does, but before we get to that, this hacking thing, it's like I'll say to Connor, here's what we have to accomplish. And he'll look at all of the camera rigs that are possible. And this is a filmmaker that actually makes the technology serve the project rather than the other way around. So instead of, you know, form dictating the content is giving rise to the form. Have you found in the filmmakers that you have met and worked with that all of these, and he's a cinematographer, I've watched visual effects people, cinematographers, directors. It's real fun to watch people learn this and, you know, bang into walls and make mistakes because that's how we're all learning. But is that, have you found that, you must be hacking, how else do you create this stuff?
Constantly. Well, that's where we came up with the 10 rig, very similar to what they're doing, but instead of putting 5 cameras, we have 7 cameras on the round, so that it gets it, so you can get a little bit closer to them. And then shooting it in 14:4 mode versus like a 2.7 or 4K. You download the resolution, but you get more overlap in solving the exact problem of being able to get closer to the camera, which is great idea.
And and that decision making about, okay, what's my resolution that I'm going to be shooting in? What's my distribution? Where am I going to go? What's the experience I want the audience to have? Like if I want to scare the crap out of them, and horror is a big genre in VR right now. More blood. If I want to do that, there are decision points that I need to make along the way. I want to see, if you can, Andrew's video, which is the slow-mo bang video that we have there.
Right, there we can get into the subject of syncing if you'd like. So this is the shot in slow motion. So this is raw, unstitched work. This is something flipped out.
Tweet, what the hell are you doing?
So great. So explain this to us. It's raw, it's unstitched.
Yeah, this one hasn't been fine stitched yet. As you saw, there was a seam that we went through.
So we're actually in equirectangular.
We're in equirectangular. Another thing, I don't know if you picked it up, but the flash from the fellow's using a prop gun that does a flash, so it makes it look like a muzzle flash from a gun. But what I'm finding with the GoPros, and this is where, you know, as filmmakers, right now, quite honestly, the GoPro's the only way to go for us because it does what we need it to do, but the GoPros aren't good cameras for this. They're very consumer cameras. They're not manual controlled, and they're rolling shutter cameras. So in this case, I could see how well I synced it. The flash between the muzzle flash of the guy's gun in all 4 cameras never syncs because of the scanning shutter. So I mean, I'm here at NAB hunting down the perfect solution of cameras in between everything.
You did tell me today you didn't find it
I didn't find it. It's not, we're almost there. It's like true, but I mean, what we need is, I want to go high frame rate, I want to go up to 8K, I want to have a very, very tight rig so the parallax is reduced as much as possible, and I want really high quality wide angle glass, which we haven't made since the 70s, which is quite disappointing. So,
well, I'm sure you can talk to Quentin Tarantino.
Sure.
And when he gets into VR, all this stuff will happen. What I have noticed, however, is if I don't know if you've seen Justin Lin's help on Google's Spotlight Stories, but they have a great behind the scenes video, which by the way is available on YouTube, and you probably should take a look at it. But that was a year ago. And all of that stuff that they made up, that Framestore and the mill made up, has now become automated, now there's software, now there's workflow. So the stuff that you're working on, thank you, Michael. So the stuff that you're working on, you know, is it ownable? Like if you figure something out.
Is there IP, you mean? Yeah.
Yes.
I don't think I can patent a 3D printed GoPro rig quite honestly. I mean, I'd really like to convince a lens manufacturer to build some lenses to our specs, but they would be the ones building it. So,
Well,
you know,
we're not concerned about IP. We just want to make good content, and we want the tools. So,
one of the, well,
yeah, that's where like we just announced the 360 Helios, which is using Blackmagic cameras, and there you can get the really ultra wide angle lenses, and you
Cameras
can
are too
experiment with that. Pardon me?
the Blackmagic is still too big for what we want to do.
Yeah,
We
I know.
want
It
really
does have a
small
large
machine vision
radius,
cameras.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
so if you look at, you know, we could have this whole discussion on cameras because we're working on a project right now where we literally, it is dark environment. It is a dark environment with red and blue lights. It is an institutional environment. It is highly secure. There is no way you can light it, and it's low light. So we're like, okay, are we going to use Canon EOS, and we're going to use the mover camera, that rig that they've put together? What are the rigs? What do you choose? What are the lenses? I literally have seen rigs where filmmakers are soldering lenses to the GoPro to make things happen.
Yep. Yeah.
So when, so I want to, let me go to Thomas for a second, because when you talk about solving problems, and let me see if I've got this right. You said I couldn't sync the shot, the gunshot. I think Thomas has the answer to that with forced perspective.
Okay, well, I don't have the answer for syncing disparate sync problems within
But you could
the
force
GoPro
somebody to look in one place.
Shutter cameras, yeah.
We've sort of approached the problem of VR because, you know, cinematic VR is problematic on every front, you know, from the capture to the stitching, and then ultimately from the storytelling perspective. So why are we doing all this stuff? Why are we, you know, perfecting these technical systems? Ultimately, it's because we want to be able to create an experience and a good story for audiences. In the end, it's not about the technology. You know, when we watch a good TV show, we don't really think about the cameras anymore and how it was edited. It's just we want a good show.
Well, we do, but
well, we do, but the audience wants a good picture. They want to be moved. They want to see something. So, you know, my background for over 20 years has been a filmmaker, and I've worked in interactive media, two very different mediums, and suddenly, beautifully, those two things are coming together into one. And so the big holy grail question is, how do you make it work for storytellers? How do you make it work for an audience?
Absolutely.
And so, you know, one of the biggest obstacles is, let's face it, you know, traditional film is incredibly powerful. You know, you can cut, you can condense space and time, you can, you know, the meaning of the film is the shots that you put together, you know, have a shot of a man and, I don't know, an injured child, and you will read something into the scene that means something different. That's really powerful stuff. Now, in VR, you can't do that. So there's gains and there's losses. So you lose the power of traditional film, but you gain an immersion, and you're able to do something you were never able to do before. You can experience space as space and time as time, but you still want to tell a story. So the job that we gave ourselves was, how do we create, you know, a platform that at least allows us to go a little further along the line between, oh, we give up, we can only play 360 video and there's no language here, to actually creating the kind of tools that are beginning to define a language. And I think we've actually found some of that vocabulary.
We're gonna actually talk about that vocabulary in a little bit, but I do want to throw this out. So, you know, I'm writing in VR right now, and I'm pretending I'm in theater. And I am using a round set here where I can see the stitch line, so I don't bring the characters too close to the stitch line, and I'm writing with my body. This is just, I'm like telling you how I'm approaching it as a writer, where I'm literally closing my eyes and wanting to recreate that sensation. And having to describe what's on either side of me is literally like being in a dream. And then having to go to someone like the director of photography and say, this is what, because the writer now has to be much more active in the actual pictures, in the actual action. It's an entirely different way of writing, and I didn't get us a VR writer, and I apologize for that. But in the blocking that you do, it does seem to me, Thomas, that it is a little bit more like theater, and not to, you know, I toured the country in Fiddler on the Roof, and we played many theaters in the round where I had to learn to act with my back, so when I was laughing, my shoulders went up and down. But now I think, thank God I had that experience, because I get it and what it will be to put someone in that. So from a storyteller perspective, I mean, I totally understand where you're going, and all of us want to see great VR. I mean, we're seeing it happen. It is my contention, you can nod or shake or say absolutely not, but you know, when the motion picture camera was invented, what you had was the engineers dancing on the screen. You didn't have, you know, great art. But then when the artists got a hold of it, suddenly, you know, you moved up, you had cinema noir, where you actually had a story in the way you lit, where you were able to create emotion, and I think this is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you look at the early roots of cinema, the people who came to it actually came from the theater. They came from other disciplines and they brought that to the film form, but then the film form found its own mature form in what is now known as the language of cinema, and, you know, which you use to tell a story. And I think you're very right. And by the way, I don't think that language of cinema was actually, it was found by the artists. It wasn't created by the artists, because it's what the brain needed to understand film. So, and I think the language of VR already exists. We just haven't discovered it yet. And it's not what we invent, it's what the brain needs to understand VR. That language, it's because we interact with a medium in a way that our brain needs to understand it. So that it's already there. So, and I do think it is going to be, like you say, a mixture of something that's between cinema and theater, and maybe much, much more than that.
You know, there's so much to talk about. We're going to take a break here in a minute, but you know, you talk about the brain. Do we have responsibility as storytellers in VR as to what we do to people's bodies? Is there a line that we would cross? Because you can be this close to Michael and have the same parallax and the same perspective. And if Michael's having a raging attack and he's yelling and screaming at me, and this is my point of view, how is that going to affect me? What's the psychology of VR?
You can look away.
Well, I can give you an example. Our cinematographer, Nico Joliet, was just in India, and he's actually sitting there in the audience. Genius.
Welcome, Nico.
And he put a camera in between a snake charmer and a cobra. So when you come into the scene, you see a guy, you know, playing with the flute, and then there's a hiss behind you, and you go, I wonder what's behind me. And then you turn around, and when you watch people watching this in Gear VR, I mean, it's cruel. We do it. You see in the body language, like, first like this, and then they're like, ah, they're trying to get away, and they run into walls, and, you know, and it's like, yeah, there is a responsibility. And then, you know, they take it off and go, you know, I don't really like snakes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's, you know, it affects, it's no longer, you're not like, thinking about it, you're feeling it immediately. So there's a huge responsibility of what you expose people to.
Quickly into the break. I happen to know that Michael actually put a camera between the fisherman and the shark. What happened?
I kind of ate it.
The shark ate the camera. And how much was that camera rig?
Well, it was a $10,000 prototype that it was in the water for less than 45 seconds, and we lost our gear. But we got a lot of PR media out of it, so at least we recouped our expense.
Where can we see the video of the shark eating the camera?
Well, you can definitely see it right on our website at 360heroes.com.
Great. We are coming back with more NAB Show Live, and my guest will be getting a little deeper into the storytelling aspects of virtual reality. Come right back.
I'm Chief Photographer Adam Napick with KOAA TV in Colorado Springs, Colorado. You're watching NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat.
Live from Las Vegas, this is NAB Show Live, produced by Broadcast Beat. Here's your host, Brian Seth Hurst.
Welcome back. As the man of the voice said, I'm Brian Seth Hurst. I actually am the chief storyteller and co-founder of Storytech and run the Storytech Immersive Practice. And today we are talking about the nuts and bolts of virtual reality production. It's a lot harder and a lot easier at the same time. It's getting easier all the time. If you're just joining us, we have Michael Kintner from 360 Heroes, who is actually a hero when it comes to VR and pushing the industry forward. We have Nicholas Berti from Video Stitch, and now the Aura 4i 4K streaming camera that just launched last week. Thomas Wallner from Deep Ink, who launched Liquid Cinema, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and Andrew McDonald from Cream in Canada, who just gave us a nice lesson on how to light a scene and how to not sync your cameras. So, okay, great. So Thomas, you launched Liquid Cinema, which is a new software for post-production, soon to be a plugin for Adobe. By the way, for all of us that are using Metal, this is like a complement to Metal, correct? It's not a replacement, they work together. So just for those of you that are using Metal after you stitch everything. So tell us a little bit about Liquid Cinema. We have some images about what it does. And we're gonna start out with the software shot. So if you've got that, that's the JPEG I've given you guys in the back there. Hello.
Well,
they don't know which one.
As they try to find it.
It's the only picture. There's 2 videos and a picture, and this is Thomas Walder's content we're looking at. Hopefully that helps.
Well, in the meantime, I can tell you what our goal was. So, you know, for all those wonderful storytelling stolen from them by this medium, and you know, all the power taken away because the audience, the lovely audience, can look anywhere, and that's great, but that's also the problem. So it means, as a filmmaker, it's very hard to direct the attention of somebody watching your 360 cinematic VR masterpiece. So basically, we wanted to build, or we are building, the tools that give the filmmakers back some control over this process. To be able to direct.
Let's talk about that
shots.
for a second.
Yeah.
So inside of VR, when you go inside a virtual reality experience, and I'm actually talking about inside a headset now, not a 360 video, I'm inside the headset, there's a lot to look around. Traditionally right now I can use sound, like we talked about, the snake behind me. I can use sound, I can use light to kind of direct attention. But the dream is to give somebody a starting point or to grab their attention by forcing the frames. It's not a frame, but by forcing the perspective.
Yeah. So let me give you an example of that. We call it forced perspective. We actually invented this, and we've done it for years, and it's so seamless that nobody actually notices. And I believe this is something that's destined to become part of the vocabulary of cinematic VR. So what is it? Okay. So right now, you're watching a 360 video, you're in it, in a headset. You're looking at what I'm looking at you right now, okay? And then that video has a cut, and we go somewhere else. However, maybe the part that is most interesting in the scene that we're cutting into is over here. But unfortunately, I'm not looking that way, so I missed the most important part of that scene. So what forced perspective does, before I even see the scene, it rotates the sphere to the thing that I'm supposed to see, meaning I will never miss, or my audience will never miss what the filmmaker intended them to see in a scene. And that's a real game changer for narrative. Because it allows you to now make sure, like right now, we're missing a lot. And we're trying to sort of guess where the audience will look. With our software, you take the guesswork out of it because you basically determine what they're going to see. And the beautiful part is they're totally free to look around so they don't feel manipulated in any way.
So when we talk to you, because I and one of my filmmakers, we talk to you because we want to use it, and we talked about the software, and I think you must have heard us make an audible gasp online.
Yeah.
Like we went, and immediately we knew what we wanted to do with it. So what a great tool. So you talked about where the audience looked. We have a heat map video. We do have the videos, and I've talked to my producer Liz in terms of the heat map video, because that was something that we also want to know. We want to know where people are looking. We want to know, what the data is, if you will, of where people are looking.
Change a lot how the video behaves after it's gone live, because it's all steered by metadata. So you could decide, they weren't looking in the right place, so I'll change my forced perspective
that's brilliant.
After the fact. And then you'll see, as the heat maps change over time, whether that was a good idea or not.
So, we're going to talk to Nicholas in a minute about live streaming, which is like it right now. Can you use the heat maps for live streaming as well?
Yes, you could. Actually, yes, you could, yeah. I think you might not... the data you amass would depend on how many people are watching at one given point, whereas if you have it downloaded, the data increases, it gets better and better. There's just one thing I wanted to add. It's unfortunate we couldn't see a screenshot of the tool of Liquid Cinema, because one of the important parts about it is right now...
I have to say it's a really beautiful interface. Very easy to use.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one little point, is on our player, all the graphical elements, the supers, the subtitles, the animated graphics, they're actually live rendered as the video plays. They're no longer burnt into the footage, and they're all controlled by the gaze of the viewer. That means, unlike all the players that are out there where it's burnt in, I honestly think live rendering all the elements is how it was meant to be, because we have a spherical medium that reacts to where you're looking. And the most important part about liquid cinema, though, is that it's a tool, and you've seen the tool, Brian.
I have.
The tool is
Brilliant.
something that anybody can use. An editor can learn how to use it in a couple of days.
Well, if you
and
know how
don't
to
have
use
to
it,
write,
even if you
don't have to write a shred of code,
yeah.
right? You can
Yep.
author across the platforms, and anyone can use it. And that's really unique. There's nothing like it out there right now. And we've gotten really good response at our booth. So if anybody wants to come by in the AR/VR section, come on down.
By the way, if you are here, that AR/VR pavilion is packed. I mean, it is packed. Just the general curiosity about that is just like people are just right over there, and your RV is there, so you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it's like
Plus,
people going to Mecca.
Yeah, and plus at the end of our booth there, we have a large dome system from Illuminati where you can step in and see a 12-foot experience, you know, that's filmed from our gear as well, which is amazing.
We're actually going to have Ed Lance on later this afternoon from Vortex Immersion.
Yes. Oh.
And Ed and I are actually working on a project together, and that has to be streamed and stitched live in 6K. You know, and you'll remember I actually called your guys, Nicholas, and I said, can you guys do 6K? And it was like, not yet. And I said, okay, great, because that's a hacked solution, and these guys are working with H.265. Okay, now I'm getting into the weeds. So I'm just sorry about that. So I want to talk about live streaming. It is, first of all, it's huge. You have Vine. Look, I'm doing Facebook Live right now. We're live streaming. And, you know, Facebook, just to get a little background, you can upload 360 video onto Facebook and onto YouTube. It can't be long before we're inundated with 360 advertising. That is why I think Facebook and Google are, you know, Google's got 70% of the advertising market. Of course, they're going to do 360 advertising. That's why the resolution is up. Let's all be honest about that. So now, you know, everybody wants to stream. And now everybody, you can get an inexpensive Theta or Pixel Pro from Kodak or Bubble Cam, and you can actually, as a consumer, take your pictures, but you can't really stream live in 4K with those consumer cameras. You have now solved that problem. So can you tell us a little about, there it is, I am coveting, just so you know, full disclosure, I asked Nicholas when the pre-order started, and I was right there. I think I was like number 50, you know? And I plunked down my money, and I'm waiting, and when Nicholas came in, don't make me beg, get on my knees in front of you and beg. But I want this camera. I see such possibility for this camera and for our clients who want to capture even the enterprise model of being able to capture conferences or capture demonstrations. It solves a lot of problems. So I've probably done your sales pitch, but
Well, maybe let's get a show of hands. Nicholas, do you think you can give that camera to our host here today?
Don't do that.
Raise a hands here. Everybody clap to be able to do that.
Don't
There you
do
go.
that. No, oh my God, we're not worthy. We're not worthy. Okay, so I'm going to move this so we can like see Nicholas here on Facebook. But
I think first, you know, like live. So there is a live streaming part where people can see the footage, you know, remotely, you know, live teleportation. But to talk about storytelling a bit, like I think live stitching and be able to see, you know, if I am a director, I want to see what I am filming.
yes.
And you know, like first, the live stitching is mainly used today for, as a director, I put a headset and I can see what the camera is actually, filming and stitching all the time. And I think this is one of the first, you know, the reason why the people are using our software for live today, the first one is for that. You know, it's
like for previs. Like we've been using the Theta Cam for like previs to figure it out. So that's great.
Yep.
Yeah, and you need like, you know, if you want to have an idea about where is the stitching line and, you know, all that kind of stuff, then if you have a headset, you know, as a director, it's like, you know, today people we shot with GoPro. I think it's a bit like when people were used to make movie with analog film, you know, like you do your videos and you know afterwards.
Go watch the rushes.
You know, yeah, right. You watch your rushes. Like, and today people, you know, they have a TV and they know what they are filming. And I think first the live is used for that. I think it's an important point for storytelling is like to have an idea about what you are filming. Either actor, you know, acting right, you know. And
you know, they have all of these multi-view technologies on the floor. You can go there and you can see multi-view, you can 4, 6, 9, and all I was thinking was, well, how do you turn multi-view into a spherical situation? And you've just done that.
Yeah. So this is like Vana VR, which is our software. Like the really first usage is for that. It's for people to have a better, like for director to have a better understanding of, like, is a shot right or not, you know. And for storytelling, I think it's a very important point.
You know, I have to tell you, that's had to be the most well-kept secret in VR, because in 360 VR, because part of our job at Storytech is to really stay ahead. So we kind of know what's going on, and we know what's in the pipeline, and I was like completely taken by surprise. So was our CFO, because I was telling Michael I just went out and spent this money, and it's like, you know, we plan these purchases, and it's like, yeah, but I didn't know it was coming. So it's interesting because I saw you talk to Robert Scoble.
Yeah.
At the Vine,
Live in the Vine, yeah.
Live in the Vine, and it was great. It was so easy to learn.
Yeah.
It really, I was like, boy, I'm really going to be able to work with this. But here's my question to you. Here you had Video Stitch, very successful. Was this always in the back of your mind?
So, like, I started this company because I was doing 360 production before. Like, I started 6 years ago, and I really started.
Which is a lifetime in VR.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's prehistory of prehistory, and like when I was doing stitching, like there was no obvious solution, you know, to have a smooth workflow. So I started to do script, and then, you know, to develop my own software, and I actually see that a lot of the people have the same needs as me. So I say, hey, why not, you know, start selling the software? And this is how it started. And from that point, it was kind of obvious, you know, because as a director, I want to see what's going on, to make a live version. You know, it was like the next steps. Like, it was obvious. And then when we start selling Vana, most of the people use GoPros. You know, this is what I've been using like 3-4 years ago. And GoPros, it's a sport camera, and like for post-production, it's a very great camera. When it's come to do live with GoPro, like GoPro is not meant to do live. You know, like there is a HDMI connector that you could use, and you can put 12 cable. If you have a 6 GoPro way, you have to have 12 cable between the GoPro and the computer, and there is a lot of
hacking
stuff, a lot of hacking, yeah, basically, to make it work. And from that point, you know, it was like, okay, if we want this market to scale, we need to have a solution that is easy enough for people to use, you know, to make a live in VR. And this is like how it, you know, this camera happened. So I think it was in my mind, but it was like, I think, you know, starting with the stitching, make it, you know, smaller step by smaller step, you know, because making a camera, if you need to do the stitching and everything at the same time, it's a big step to do. So it's like, you know, it's obviously making a camera is a important step, but I think it's pretty natural because we want to solve, you know, the problems that producers have when they are doing content in VR.
So the thing about the camera is this, which I think is brilliant, is the stitching box is actually separate from the camera, correct?
Yeah.
And how much cable is between the camera and the stitching box?
There is a single cable.
But how long is that cable?
Oh, so it can be up to 300 feet.
300 feet?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, like, you know, if you're here, for instance, and you could have 5 or 6 cameras. So you will have these different cameras, and you will have cable, you know, going backstage, and you will have all your stitching box there.
That's great. So, I mean, live is obviously where, I mean, Ozo announced live. You know, you have NextVR, you have Voke VR. These are professional cameras that are shooting live.
And YouTube announced yesterday that, you know.
Yesterday, and tonight at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
Is when you'll be able to see. Verge is doing their first program, and then Coachella this weekend will be shot in for YouTube 360. So it's like, but you know, you also look and you go, well, is the audience going to get used to 360 and not migrate into VR, or is it up to us to lead them by great story into VR? I now think there's kind of a split between 360 and VR that's happening, and also, you know, we have our VR purists who are like, 360 is not VR, and it isn't really. So, you know, you've got both these things happening, yet everybody's going to buy 360 advertising, but no one's going to buy VR advertising, right? So it'll be interesting to see how the industry develops. I want to talk about sound really quickly. Sound, you know, a lot of cameras have it on board. Dysonics has the Rondo mic. There are a lot of ambisonic sound mics. There's 2 ears, I think.
2 big ears.
2 big ears. Hello?
Yep.
You guys work with them, right?
Yes.
And 3DIO is another company.
Yes, and so it used to be now on Soundfield, they finally have something that goes right to format B. So just so you know, when you record the sound, it's format A, then you have to convert it to format B. So that process isn't automated yet. But we already talked, maybe, you have virtual reality directors of production who have a different language that they're using. What about sound design? Where are we going with that?
Sound is also very important. Coming as a cinematographer from the linear world, I always say sound is 49% of the finished product. So it's important. But in VR, the 360 spatial audio is definitely something that adds and enhances the experience. But you have to treat it production-wise like you treat surround sound that we are used to in cinematic theaters. You can go into an environment with a 360 spatial mic or put one on the camera or have a camera with one built in. Fantastic. That's your guide. To make proper good sound, you need Foley, like the explosions you want to put in, or the sound of rain, or individual lavs on the characters that are talking, so you can use your guide to know where the direction of the sound is coming from, but have a clean, independent track that you can mix in and out. So it's a whole spectrum.
Yeah, we're figuring that out now, just because it's a very tense situation. It's a guy's life is at stake, so every little sound affects his nerves and where he is. And we've been talking about what microphones we're going to use and how that sound is going to be edited. We have a short time left, so I'm going to go back to the rhythm of the industry. Because I said earlier, let's focus on Michael here. I said earlier that it was the fastest moving industry ever. Can you give me some of your numbers, some of your sales numbers, some of your statistics?
Yeah, right now we've had a couple different statistics comes in. We've sold a little over 12,000 rigs worldwide, and right now, because of the demand has been so high, we've actually are moving out of the 3D printing business to get into the injection molded aluminum.
This is beautiful.
Yeah, it just
injection molded.
It makes things so much easier. Now we can keep up with the demand. That's the big thing. And what's really interesting is we were told by Upload VR and a couple other companies that there's a little over 190,000 360 videos right now, and they're growing at a rate of 20 to 30,000 videos a month.
Wow. Well,
so
Facebook,
that's incredible.
Google delivered some of these statistics. 750,000 photos were taken in the first few months of the cardboard cam, and that's just pictures, consumers using pictures. Tell me about, because all these colleges and universities around the country, they're really trying now to start these VR programs. They're adding it in their film schools. They haven't quite nailed it yet. What are the classes? You guys got into teaching classes, which, by the way, I'm actually thinking of taking, even though I've been stumbling over VR for quite some time. It might make it easier. But.
Well, it was interesting because we worked with VRLA on one of the first classes that we started doing in the LA market. And when they introduced a class, it actually sold out in 5 hours. And then everybody was really upset. They wanted to get into the next class. So we did a class the next day, and that sold out in 20 minutes. So there's a really high demand. But one of the
storytellers.
It's one of the things that we really like to do is teach people how to use this gear in such a fashion so that you can prevent parallax. So that when this particular
explain parallax to audiences.
Yeah. So the parallax in most cases is when you look at this camera, you've got a camera facing all these different directions. Well, you want to make sure you keep your talent in front of these lenses and not on the seam of the lens. And where these two come together, this is where parallax is actually happening. And if you can utilize and film using that type of technology and use these, you can save tons of time in post.
Yes, when you get into post and have to fix stuff, forget about it.
Yeah, it becomes a real challenge because, especially if you're too close, it's not there. There is no content. Yes. So you can't fix that. So it's
unless you get the right lenses.
Unless you get the right lenses, exactly.
So which have yet to be built.
Our courses are available in Boston, in LA.
Yep. In our LA office, we're setting it up so that it's a full workflow. So from filming to using the different work tools that are out there, like Video Stitch and Kohler, and then how to actually do post final work with like Skybox. And then more importantly is how do you prepare the content for playing on iOS, Android, displays and stuff like that.
Guys, we're out of time. We could talk about this stuff forever because we all love it. Michael Kittner from 360 Heroes, Nicholas Berti from Video Stitch and Aura4i, Thomas Wallner from Deep Ink, and Andrew McDonald from Cream. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you want to know about their companies, they're all online, 360 Heroes. If you want to get started, and really you can wipe up. You are watching NAB Live Show, live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Be back soon because we've got a lot more for you. And later this afternoon, we actually have something on VR streaming. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, guys. It was great.